Hi guys, my name is Melissa, and in today's video we're going to be talking about odds and evens, and we're going to talk about twos and halves. So first of all, for twos, we can split every even number into groups of two, or into two equal groups. For example, we have 12 dots, and we know that 12 is an even number because based on our previous video, numbers that end in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8 are even numbers, right? And so 12 ends with a 2, so it's an even number. And it can be split into 6 groups of 2 or into 2 groups of 6. So 6 groups of 2, or we can split it up into 2 groups of 6 dots. Now if we try to split an odd number, again, an odd number ends with 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9. If we try to split an odd number into groups of 2 or into 2 equal groups, there will always be 1 extra. For example, if we have 13 dots, if we try to split it into 6 groups of 2, then we're going to have 1 dot left. If we try to split it into 2 groups of 6 dots, then it's going to give us 1 dot left as well. So solve each problem. We have some practice problems, and it says try to solve each problem without counting the number of dots. So without counting, we're going to try to figure out if the figure has an even number of dots or not. So to do that, we're going to try grouping it into 2. That works without giving us any leftover dots, so we know that that's even. Instead of circling it into 2 groups, we can also circle it into many groups of 2 dots like this. So this one works, so it's an even number. Now if we look here, if we try to group it into 2 different groups of 5 dots in each group, we have 1 left over. So we know that that's odd. Again, if we try to group it into multiple groups of 2 dots, that also works. We still have 1 dot left, so that's an odd number of dots. Now for this, we can group it into 2 groups of 8 dots, or again, we can group it into multiple groups of 2 dots without any remainders. And so this is an even number of dots. For this, we can group it into 2 groups of 6 dots without any remainder, so that's also even. Now for this, although it looks kind of interesting and different from what we've been seeing so far, we can still group it into 2 groups of 6 dots, so this one is also even. Now the next problem says circle every figure below with an odd number of dots. Now we should have a remainder when we try to group it into 2s. So grouping into 2 groups of 5 dots, we don't have any remainders, so that's an even number of dots. For this, we can group it into 2 whole groups of 10 dots each, so that's also an even number of dots. Now for this, since it's not in like a perfect square, that's easy for us to kind of group into 2 groups. We're going to try grouping into multiple groups of 2 and see if that gives us any remainders. And it doesn't, so that's an even number of dots. Now let's look here. I'll try grouping it into multiple groups of 2 dots. And then we're left with 1 remainder. So that is that's an odd number of dots. Now here again, since the way that the dots are kind of grouped makes it hard for us to group it into two whole groups, we're going to group it into multiple groups of 2 dots. And that does work out without any remainders, so it's an even number of dots. And if you guys can see this, this is also another way of grouping the dots into 2 groups. Now we'll look at problem 8. Circle every figure below with an even number of dots. So again, since it's kind of hard for us to identify based on the shape, we're going to try grouping 2 dots, so multiple groups of 2 dots. That does work, so that's even. Let's try here. Grouping multiple groups of 2 dots gives us a remainder, so we know that that's odd. Another way to see this, again, is to group it into 2 whole groups of 8 dots. We have 1 remainder left, so that's also an odd, number of dots. Now if we look here, we can again do the 2 dot method. That leaves us 1 remainder, so we know that it's odd. Another way to see this is that we can group it into 2 whole groups like this. So 8 dots, we have 1 remainder left, so it's an odd number of dots. Now for here, we're going to try grouping it into 2 dots. Multiple groups of 2 dots, again, because the shape is kind of hard for us to divide into 2 groups only. So we're going to try multiple groups of 2 dots and see if that gives us any remainders. And it doesn't, so this is an even number of dots. Then we have our last figure. Yeah, well, let's try multiple groups of 2 dots. It gives us a remainder, so it's odd. Again, another way to do this is just group it into 2 whole groups of 4 dots. We still have 1 remainder left, so it's an odd number of dots. So to answer each question below, circle even or odd. Every jackalope in a field has 2 horns. Is the total number of horns in all the jackalopes in the field even or odd? So here, if a number can be split into groups of 2, then it's even. And since every jackalope has 2 horns, that basically ensures that we always have multiple groups of 2. So this is 1 jackalope, and there's going to be, let's say that these circles are horns, then we're always going to have 2 horns in it. So whatever number of jackalopes there are in the field is basically the number of groups of 2 dots that we have. So it is always basically groupable into 2. So that would be even. Margot invites monsters to her birthday party, and every monster she invites brings 1 friend. Including Margot, is the total number of monsters even or odd? So for every friend, they bring 1 other friend. So that basically means that that's a group of 2 friends. And for every friend that Margot invites, there's always going to be 1 friend that tags along. So it's always going to be a group of 2 friends. So right now it looks like even. But now there's Margot, and she's just 1 person, right? So what this is going to look like is multiple groups of 2, and we have one remainder Mergle, so that's going to be odd since we have a remainder. The next problem says Ria has a stack of index cards. She draws one shape on the front and back of each index card. Is the total number of shapes Ria draws even or odd? So let's look at one index card. So that's going to be the front, and this is going to be the back. She draws one shape on the front and one shape on the back. So in one index card, there's always going to be 2 shapes. So that means that how many numbers of index card there are is going to be the number of groups that there are, and there's always going to be 2 shapes in each group without any remainder, so it's going to be even. Now, next problem says beastball teams always have the same number of players. On the beastball field, there are 2 teams and a referee. Now, since we have the same number of players and 2 teams, that tells us that we have 2 whole groups with the same numbers. And so that tells us that it's even. But then we have a referee. And the referee is going to be one person, so that's going to be a remainder, and so that would be odd. A group of monsters high-five each other. Winnie asks each monster how many high-fives they gave and adds their answers up. Is the total even or odd? Now every high-five takes place between 2 monsters. And so every high-five is going to be counted twice. Meaning it's counted twice, it's going to be considered as 2. And so that would be even. Now we're going to learn about a concept called half. So when we split a number into 2 equal amounts, each amount is half of the original. For example, what is half of 16? We're going to draw 16 dots, and if we divide that into 2 whole groups, there's 8 dots in each group. And so half of 16 is going to be 8. And so half of 26, or another way that we can do the example for 16 is 8 plus 8 is going to be 16, right? So half of 26, we can think of this as having 26 dots. So we can think of this as having 26 dots. Sorry, I was pressing the wrong button. So here we have 26 dots. Group it into 2, which basically is splitting into half. Each group has 13 dots, or 13 plus 13. So 2 copies of 13 gives us 26, so half is going to be 13. For half of 48, 24 plus 24. So 2 copies of 24 gives us 48. So half of 48 is going to be 24. Half of 406, we cannot draw out 406 dots. So let's try thinking of this as 203 plus 203. Now another easy way to do this, since the number is quite large, is we're going to divide 406 into 400 plus 6. Now 400 is 200 plus 200, and 6 is 3 plus 3. So taking halves of each, we're going to do 200 plus 3, which is 203. Now we have half of 268. For this, we can split 268 into 200 plus 60 plus 8. 200 is 100 plus 100. 60 is 30 plus 30. And 8 is 4 plus 4. So we're going to add the halves of each number. So that's going to be 100 plus 30 plus 4, which is 134. Now half of 34 can also be split into 30 plus 4. And 30 is 15 plus 15. 4 is 2 plus 2. So 15 plus 2 gives us 17. Now let's look at half of 52. 52 can be split into 50 plus 2. 50 is 25 plus 25, and 2 is 1 plus 1. So 25 plus 1 gives us 26. And so 2 copies, just to confirm, of 26 gives us 52. Half of 250, which can be written as 200 plus 50. 200 is 100 plus 100. And 50 is 25 plus 25. So 100 plus 25 is equal to 125. We have half of 770. That can be split into 770. 700 is 350 plus 350. 70 is 2 copies of 35. And so we're doing 350 plus 35, which is 385. Now, what number will you get if you double 479 and find half of the result? So doubling means that we're going to add it 2 times. And so that is going to be a result. But if we find half of the result, then we just take 1, right? So that's basically just going to be 479. And later on, if you guys learn multiplication, you guys will learn that finding the half, or dividing, and doubling, multiplying by 2. So multiplying by 2 and dividing by 2 is basically going to cancel each other out. But we'll learn that in future videos. The next problem asks, what number is half of 144? So let's take the first half. So half of that is going to be, let's just split that into 100 plus 40 plus 4. And so 100 is 50 plus 50. 40 is 20 plus 20. 4 is 2 plus 2. So half of 144 is going to be 50 plus 20 plus 2, which is 72. Right, and so half of 144 is 72. Now we need to take the half again. So that's 70 plus 2. So 35 plus 35 is 70. 1 plus 1 is 2. And so half of 72 is going to be 36. Now half of 144 is 36. And now we need to take one more half. 30 plus 6 and 15 plus 15 is 30. 3 plus 3 is 6. So half of 36 is going to be 15 plus 3, which is 18. So our answer is going to be 18. Now we're on the last page. So Vike has 147 marbles and Ash has 93 marbles. They decide to put their marbles into one pile and then share the pile equally, meaning that they split it into half. How many marbles will each monster get? So basically we're doing 147 plus 93, and that gives us 240. 240 can be rewritten as 200 plus 40, which is 100 plus 100 plus 20 plus 20. So taking halves, we're doing 100 plus 20. So that's going to be 120 marbles each. Then we'll look at the next problem. So half of the students at Parity Elementary School are boys, and half of the boys at Parity Elementary School wear glasses. 48 boys wear glasses at Parity Elementary School. How many students attend the school? So 48 boys wear glasses at Parity, and that number is half of the boys, half of the number of boys. So basically that tells us that 48 plus 48 is number of boys at Parity, since half of that is the number of boys that wear glasses, and that's 48. But then this number itself is half of the students at Parity Elementary School. So considering this as one whole, we're going to add that 2 times, since that was half. So we're doing 48 plus 48 plus 48 plus 48. And that's going to give us 96 plus 96, right? Since 48 plus 48 is 96. And so 96 plus 96 is going to give us 192 students. Exactly half of the animals on Mr. Piggin's farms are chickens. Circle every number below that could be the number of animals. Now that means that since it's exactly half, that means that we can group them into exactly 2 groups, and that indicates that the number must be even. So 18 ends with 8, so it's even. Ending with the 5 is odd. Ending with the 6 is even. Ending with the 8 is even. Ending with the 3 is odd. Ending with the 7 is odd. And ending with the 2 is even. So the possible numbers of animals would be 18, 76, 98, and 952. And last question, each number in the list below is 10 more than half the number to its left. Okay, so this might be a little tricky, but let's try. So this number, this blank number, half of blank plus 10 is 52. And so we're going to do that in reverse order. So since it's 10 more, we're going to subtract 10. 52 minus 10 is 42. And then, right, so that was 42. And then, so 42 is half of this number. And so we're going to do 42 plus 42, which gives us 84. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to subtract 10 first, which gives us 74. And since 74 is half of this number, we're going to add 74 once more. And so that is going to be 148. Now let's go in the correct order now. So we add 10. So instead of doing 10 first, now we're going to have to take the half first. So half of 38 is going to be 18, and 18 plus 10 is 28. Half of 28 is going to be 14, since 14 plus 14 is 28. Now add 10 to that, it gives us 24. 24 divided by 2, or half of 24 is going to be 12, and 12 plus 10 is 22, so that's correct. And half of 22 is going to be 11, since 11 plus 11 is 22. And then add 10, so that gives us 21. In the previous video where we did some challenge problems, we had time left over, so we went over dot traces. And so to check up on that and also to check on previous strategies that we've learned so far, we're going to go over some more challenge problems today since we've covered today's topic. And so we'll look at the first challenge problem. And so it says Rosa adds 4 consecutive whole numbers and circle the only number below that could be her results. And so it says she adds 4 consecutive whole numbers. And again, so last time when we talked about consecutive whole numbers, it says we know that consecutive whole numbers, if it starts with odd, it's going to go to even, back to odd, and so forth. Again, if it starts with even, odd, back to even, and so forth. And so it says she adds 4 consecutive whole numbers. So that means that there's going to be 2 evens and 2 odds. And then so it's going to be even plus odd plus odd. And so let me rewrite that. So I'll just write it as E plus O plus O. We know that even plus even is even, and odd plus odd is even based on the pattern that we learned. And even plus even will eventually give us an even result. And so we're going to circle the only number below that could be your result. So first of all, we're going to cross out all odd numbers. So we're left with 44 and 66. And so now we're going to guess and check to see if we can find 4 consecutive numbers that sum up to 44 or 66. And so, for example, 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12, that gives us 42. And then, so we need a slightly bigger number. So we're going to try 10 plus 11 plus 12 plus 13. And that gives us 46. And so you can tell that there's no 4 consecutive numbers that add up to 44. So it's most likely going to be 66. And the 4 consecutive numbers are going to be 15 plus 16 plus 17 plus 18. Now we're going to look at problem 134. So it says, draw 2 straight lines that split the 16 dots below into groups that all have a different odd number of dots. And so there are multiple ways to do this, but one way to do this is we're going to split it like this. And so there's 3, 1, 5, and 7. So there's two straight lines, and it's split into groups with all different odd number of dots. And then for 135, it says, Lizzie writes a list of numbers using the following rules. If a number is even, she takes half of it to get the next number, and if a number is odd, she adds 3 to it to get the next number. So the first number in Lizzie's list is 57, and so we're going to fill in the next 8 numbers in our list. So for 57, since 57 is odd, she's going to add 3 to get 60. And then 60 is now even, so she's going to take half of it, so it's going to be 30. 30 is still even, so she's going to take half to get 15. Now 15 is odd, so she's going to add 3 to get 18. 18 is even, so she's going to get half. 9 is odd, so she's going to add 3 to get 12. 12 is even, so she's going to take half and ultimately end with 6. And then it says, what is the hundredths number in Lizzie's list above? And so if we look here, the first number is 57, second number is 60, third is 30, fourth number is 15, fifth number is 18, sixth number is 9, seventh number is 12, and eighth number is 6. And then just continuing on, we know that the ninth number is going to be 3 since we divide by 2, or we're taking the half since 6 is an even number. Then the 10th number is going to be 6 because 3 is odd. And then this pattern of 6, 3, 6, 3 is going to repeat. And we know that when the term number is even, it's going to be 6. And when the term number is odd, like 9, it's going to be 3. So 100 is an even term number. And so the hundredth number is going to be 6. Now we'll look at problem 137. So it says, Mike has between 30 and 40 pennies, and he separates the pennies into 2 equal piles. Then he separates each of these smaller piles into 2 equal piles, and then after this, Mike can no longer separate each pile into 2 equal piles. How many pennies does Mike have? So in this case, Mike splits the original pile of pennies into 2 equal piles. And so, meaning that he split it into 2 equal piles, that can only be possible if the number was even. Because if it was odd, then one pile would have to have one more penny than the other. So we know that initially he had an even number of pennies. And so the possibility would be 32, 34, 36, or 38. So if it was 32, each group would have 16. If it was 34, 17, 36, 18, and 38 would be 19 for each group. Then he separates each of these smaller piles into 2 equal piles. Again, then half of the initial would also have to be even. And so half would have been 16, 17, 18, 19. So only 16 and 18 would be possible. So 32 or 36 would be the possible initial number he has. But then after that, Mike can no longer separate each pile into 2 equal piles. So now that tells us that now he has an odd number of pennies. And so that's going to be 16 to 8 and 18 to 9. So it's going to be 9, which is odd. So he would have initially started with 36 pennies. Now we're going to look at 138, and that is dot tracing. And so we learned that we should start with an odd and end in an odd. So we're going to look for a dot. We're going to look for an odd dot, which is dot that's connected to an odd number of dots. And it's going to be these two because it's connected to 5 dots. And so these are our 2 odd dots. So we're going to start with this odd dot. And then we're going to trace like so. And then we're going to go trace the outlinings. And I'm going to go inwards like that. We still haven't crossed one line twice, and then we ended back into an odd dot. And so that trace is correct, but there are many other ways to trace this drawing. And so if you started with an odd dot, ended with the odd dot, and followed all the rules, then your solution or your path is probably correct as well. Now we have our last problem. And so it says, Winnie writes 20 consecutive numbers from least to greatest, and exactly one of the statements below is true. Circle the statement that must be true. And so Winnie's 5th number is odd. If the 5th number is odd, then the 7th and 9th numbers are also odd, and the 6th and 8th numbers are even. And so based on this, assuming that the first one is true, then we have 3 true statements, but it says only one is true. And so it's impossible for the first one to be true because then we would have more than one true statement. Now, if we assume that the second statement is true, Winnie's 6th number is odd, then that means that the 5th and 7th ones are going to be even, and the 6th and 8th ones are going to be odd. Right, and so 5th is odd, 7th is odd, 8th is even, 9th is going to be odd. And so all of these are false, and so this one must be the true statement. And so since we're told that only one statement is true, it must be the second statement. And that's it for today's video. I'll see you guys in the next video.